What is up and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be answering the question of how many people actually own one full Bitcoin. So this is a question that is typically very hard to answer because of some of the assumptions you'll see that we have to make. But before we jump into the video, please make sure to give this a like, hit the subscribe button, and if you want to know everything else about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space, make sure that you are subscribed. So some of the numbers that we're about to look at might even surprise you, but let's dive straight in. So last year we hit a pretty big milestone in terms of the number of Bitcoin addresses that have a balance of over 1 Bitcoin. So you can see that the amount of Bitcoin wallet addresses holding more than 1 Bitcoin has obviously been steadily increasing since 2010, the inception of Bitcoin, even before that. But during 2023, we hit an inflection point where there are now more than 1 million addresses holding at least 1 BTC. So as of January 5th, 2024, we can see that the amount of Bitcoin wallet addresses holding more than 1 Bitcoin is 1,023,937. However, one address does not equal one person. And there's a few assumptions we're going to have to make here as we get to a bit of a calculation about how many people actually own more than 1 Bitcoin, and not just how many addresses hold more than 1 Bitcoin. Because the amount of addresses that actually hold Bitcoin is, far greater than the amount of people. So Glassnode estimates that the average number of addresses per entity or per person is 31.5 Bitcoin addresses. Okay, so this number of 1 million addresses doesn't equate to the number of people for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we can have people that hold more than 1 Bitcoin in multiple different addresses. So you could be one person that has 1 Bitcoin at one address plus 1 Bitcoin at another address. And the other thing this does not take into consideration is people that might have less than 1 Bitcoin in multiple wallets, in multiple addresses, but they actually hold more than 1 Bitcoin in total. So they might have 0.5 Bitcoin in one address and another 0.5 Bitcoin in a separate wallet address, therefore equaling 1 total Bitcoin, but they would not be captured by this type of chart because this only shows the individual addresses with more than 1 BTC. So in order to try to get an estimate, and it's pretty much impossible to get this exactly right, but in order to get an estimate of the actual number of physical people that have more than 1 Bitcoin, we have to make a couple of assumptions. So the first assumption that we're going to make is based on the Glassnode data that there's an average of 31.5 addresses per person. Okay, so if we take the number of wallet addresses up here that have more than 1 BTC, or at least 1 BTC, we've got 1,023,937. Dividing that by the average number of wallet addresses per person, we get 32,506 people. Okay, so that's the first part of our equation. That's the first assumption that we have to make. Then we have to look at the second factor, which is all of the people that potentially have 1 Bitcoin, but have less than 1 Bitcoin per wallet. So it's a pretty big assumption we're making here, but what we're saying is that dividing 1 by 31.5 gives us 0.0317 BTC, which means that the average person controls 31.5 Bitcoin addresses. So what we're saying here is that anyone that has any address that has less than 1 Bitcoin, but at least 0.03 Bitcoin could be classified as a person that has at least 1 Bitcoin if they have 0.0317 Bitcoin spread across 31.5 addresses. again, it's a pretty big assumption, but we have to factor in some assumptions in order to generate an estimate of how many people are actually holding at least one Bitcoin. So, how many people or how many wallets are there with at least 0.0317 Bitcoin, which is currently equal to about $1,390? We don't know is the short answer, but what we do have data on is we have data on the amount of Bitcoin addresses with a balance of at least $1,000. So obviously that's lower than our estimate on our assumption for 1390, but it's the closest data that we have for on-chain data. So we're going to have to run with it. And again, it's a pretty big assumption. So what that means is the number of Bitcoin addresses with at least $1,000 is 7.408 million Bitcoin addresses. What we need to do then is we need to subtract the 1,023,937 that we already accounted for above, because those million have more than one Bitcoin. These addresses have more than 1,000, but obviously we need to disregard the 1 million that we've already accounted for above. That gives us about 6.3 million Bitcoin addresses with more than $1,000 remaining. And then if we divide that 6.3 million by our average wallet addresses per person, we get 31.5, giving us a total of 202,669 people. The final step in the process is to add together our 202,669 with our 32,506 people from above, giving us a total of about 235,175 people who own at least one full Bitcoin. So this number might be surprising to a lot of people. It's quite small. It is literally 0.002% of the entire world population that own at least one Bitcoin at this moment in time. We obviously had to make a couple of very big assumptions here, but I think that, on the upper end, 1 million addresses with at least one Bitcoin is the absolute ultimate maximum amount of people that could have it. And if we be more realistic and break down the data with some of the assumptions that we've made, it's probably, taking it at an average of about 250,000 people who own one full Bitcoin. So if you own one full Bitcoin, you are part of a pretty exclusive club of people, 0.002% of the global population. That is based on the most up-to-date on-chain data that we have as of January 6, 2024. It'll be interesting to see how this continues to grow. And with the halving coming up in April of 2024, how much Bitcoin is going to be in circulation, the amount of Bitcoin available on exchanges decreasing over the past couple of years, ETF approvals on the horizon, and supply and demand. Just knowing these numbers is pretty crazy to think about how few people still own one full Bitcoin, and how the supply and demand dynamics will play out as we continue to see the halving take effect over the next 12 to 18 months. So this is the best estimate that we can get right now. Pretty small club, pretty exclusive club. So let us know in the comments if you are part of that club, and if you have any questions or ideas about how we can better calculate the exact amount of people with at least one Bitcoin, let us know. As always, if you like these videos, if you enjoy them, leave a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Give a subscribe, and you will get notified about future videos. We'll be dropping videos every week on everything to do with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for the foreseeable future. So drop a thumbs up, drop a subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.